Should you buy the Fell Xenologue DLC? If you're just here for the TLDR of my opinion, or I suppose the TLDW since you're watching, then, long story short, it's gonna be a big fat no. But if you want to hear a little bit about the why, and hear me break it down and basically review the whole thing, then stick around and listen, or skip to the parts you want to hear about in the timestamps below. Also, while you're down there, maybe leave a like and subscribe. I'm pretty close to hitting the big 20k, and we've got some exciting content on the horizon that you really don't want to miss. Also, before I start, if you want to take a minute or two to hear me out, I wanted to talk about a few things regarding the channel. If you don't care, that's also cool, that's what the timestamps are for, so you can go ahead and skip ahead if you want, but I promise I'm going to be quick. Anyways, the channel has had a lot of Fire Emblem focus since its inception, and that's not going anywhere. There's still going to be a lot of Fire Emblem on the channel, but it's never only been about Fire Emblem. In the coming weeks, you might start to see some videos on other games that I want to cover in a review style. Historically, these videos didn't really perform very well for me, and I know a lot of you might not be very interested, but the YouTube algorithm heavily punishes branching out, so I'd be really grateful if you guys would take some time out of your day to support these when they do come out. That's it. The channel isn't dying, I'm not going anywhere, Fire Emblem is still going to be around, I just want to share some more of the other games I play with you guys. As a little teaser for those of you who stuck around, there's going to be some Octopath 2 stuff and some Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection stuff, and I'll leave it at that. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get started on some of the good things about the DLC, which are the story and characters. Shocker, I know, right? I didn't expect it either. The characters here aren't just some one-note gimmick, they're actually integral to the story, they have a backstory, and they develop along the way as they tackle their past issues and insecurities. For a story that's written in only 6 chapters, this was actually pretty good, and all I'm left with is the thought of why the hell they didn't do this for the main game, or at least give us this story instead of what we got. We're sent to an alternate universe in this one, where the Elir there has died during the last major conflict, as well as the kings and queens of the other countries that we know about. Instead, we're left with all the royals, that we have grown to love or hate, for better or for worse, as well as Nell and Nil, who are 2 fell dragons who have fought against Sombron and are trying to do the right thing. I won't spoil the plot further than that for those who want to experience it, because I personally hate spoilers and would hate anyone to get spoiled by my own content without a spoiler warning, but all I will say is that I think the conflict leading up to this, and Nell and Nil's stories, are far more interesting than anything we had in the base game, and I would have loved to experience that as the main story, and then have this as the DLC, rather than what we actually got. Sometimes I honestly don't really understand what Intelligent Systems is trying to do, and I feel like trying to understand them over the last 20 years or so has just given me more headache than otherwise should have, so I just don't try anymore. But this would have been an actually good story, with decently written characters, to pursue as an anniversary game instead of the Quirk Mania shitshow we ended up getting as our main story. There's not really much else to say about it, since a lot of the faces are familiar, and all the characters are basically the opposite of what their singular character trait was in the base game, but here it feels less invasive than it did there, and a lot of them have a tiny bit more substance to them in addition to said reversed trait. The 4 Winds, for example, are honestly kind of endearing, and I enjoyed their company, but the Royals still kind of suck for the most part, though seeing reverse Alchrist and Diamant was kind of funny and gave me a chuckle, I will admit that. In comparison to the main game though, this is miles better. But I don't think it's anything earth-shattering or top tier in terms of the story or the writing quality. We still have a ways to go for that, unfortunately. For some reason, I can never really remember if the music is any good or not, but from what I recall, there were some reused tracks alongside the new ones, and I don't recall it being bad, though I have some major PTSD from the final map music because I was listening to it for probably about 15 hours and I'd like to never hear it again. Thank you very much. Outside of that, I'm just going to tack this onto the music section quickly because it's going to be brief and I have no idea where else to put it. But there isn't really an improvement to the visual or graphical fidelity of the DLC. It's still the same game as Engage, it still looks nice and the animations are still fantastic, but they're just not getting better, they're not getting worse either. Now let's get to the meat and potatoes of this video, and probably the longest segment, and probably the majority of this video as well, and that's talking about the gameplay. I'm gonna come out and say it right out the gate. Maddening Fell Xenologue is the closest I've ever come in my 20 years of Fire Emblem of just giving up on playing a map. And no, it actually was not Chapter 3. But before I get to that, let's talk about it overall. I'm sure you all know by now that you get Nil and Nell as two new units that trigger a game over if they die because they're treated like Aleer as lords. And I'm sure you also already know that Nil is just a walking liability that gets one-shot by almost everything, and Nell is just excessively mediocre as a unit, so she won't contribute much outside of Dragon class Emblem synergy. You also get 3 of the 4 wins alongside this, and with that, you are up to an eventual 5 units that are all force deployed. And if we include Aleer, that's 6, but Aleer is treated a little bit differently, and I'll talk about that in a bit. This is going to comprise the majority of your roster, alongside a handful of units from your base game that you can bring along with you. The catch? Your base game units will be at fixed levels and stats, and won't be able to gain any EXP. Well, actually, all the units in the DLC are like this, and they scale up from chapter to chapter. The one thing that isn't fixed is that any base game unit you will have will be able to use skills that they've inherited, as well as carry forward their bond levels with rings or bracelets. Unfortunately, you can't do any of that stuff for the 5 DLC characters, so they suck by comparison. Sure, a unit like Celestia is good in chapters 2 and 3, while Nell can survive a round or 2 and be decent support, but that's about it. I guess we're kind of lucky that permadeath isn't a thing in this game mode as well, otherwise it would be very infuriating trying to do deathless clears with these units. Anyways, if it seems like I jumped a bit all over the place, it's because I did, but the bottom line is that the implementation of the 4 wins, Nell and Nil, seems to be quite a bit half-assed gameplay-wise, as they're all stuck at bond level 1 and can't inherit any skills despite having the SP to do so if you look at their profiles in-game. I have to wonder if this really was intentional, or if they just got lazy and didn't want to code it, or didn't test the game, which honestly that's kind of what it feels like. We'll never truly know, but I can't say it's not janky or a bit weird. One other thing that I find weird is the access you have to your inventory. Every map, your inventory resets, and every unit has a set inventory. You can trade around stuff or store it in your convoy to access during the map, but let's say you want to use a Levin sword, for example. Well, you're out of luck because only Celine has it. And if, like me, you're trying to give it to Celestia, well, the Force Deployed 5 can't even trade in the pre-battle menu, which is so bad. Why they restricted some of the most basic functions of the game from these units is beyond me, and I can't put my finger on it aside from it just being bad design. If you're gonna make the game difficulty unbalanced, which I'm about to get to, don't make it worse by just having regular quality of life features taken away as well. It's not clever to have me convoy funneling my units basic weapons on turn 1 of a battle. It's just an engineered inconvenience at this point, and it's not fun. Now, elephant in the room time, let's talk about the map design and the difficulty. I might be saying something controversial here, but I'm going to be completely honest with you all. I think every map in the Fell Xenologue on Maddening is doable by playing the way the developers intended you to play it. Having said that though, I firmly believe that they didn't test and balance these difficulties, because normal is an absolute joke of a difficulty where you can probably just auto battle all the maps and you'd be fine. Hard is a pretty rough challenge, but it's doable. And Maddening is borderline impossible unless you're playing perfectly, you know what you're doing, the RNG rolls in your favor, or you cheese every map by not playing it the way the developers intended you to. The point I'm trying to make is, the maps are solvable. And while you might not like me saying this, it's about refining your strategy, thinking outside the box a little, and maybe using units and rings, skills, or bracelets that you hadn't really used before. For example, we've all spammed the Lin ring to death in the base game, but here she's even better because Mulligir has corrupted weapon effectiveness and every enemy in the game is corrupted. By proxy, that also makes Erica, a ring that I didn't really use in the base game, one of the best emblems in this game because she gives you access to Sieglinde, and this will rip through every enemy in the game in one round if you put it on a fast character like Marin or Kagetsu. Trust me, Marin was my MVP on every single map. There are also things like Soren's assigned decoy that are amazingly good here because it forces enemies to stay away from your weak units, I'm looking at you, Nil, and target your tanks or combat units instead. Veronica's Summon Hero is also nice to give you some extra firepower for your restricted roster for a few turns, and the Three Houses bracelet combos are still really strong. Of course, base game stuff like Seed-All Dancing and putting the Byleth Ring on one of your units are still incredibly useful, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's all still doable. Even on Maddening, if you're willing to bash your head against the titanium wall for long enough, it will start to dent. That is, until you reach the final chapter. Now, it's been over a week since I finished beating the final chapter on Madden, and I've been so burned out from my attempts that I haven't been able to make a video, among other reasons, but I won't get into those. The final chapter took me 3 full days of attempts. I was a broken man. I was ready to quit. I was even ready to shower off the sweaty gamer stench, go outside, and be a productive member of society. But the true villain inside me said that if I can't conquer this challenge, how the hell am I going to rule the world one day? And so I kept at it, and eventually I found a solution. The problem is, I don't think I did it the way the developers intended you to play this map either, despite me killing the boss at the top of the map where he is supposed to end at, and without having his damage reduction tiles. To keep it short, this map is rough, and I've yet to see someone do it in the exact order that they wanted you to. The boss moves around the map, to bottom left, middle, bottom right, top left, and then top center. As he does that, he slowly destroys the map, which basically just deletes the tile underneath you and one-shots any unit standing on them, foe or friend. Along the way, he also summons reinforcements, and does AoEs that you shouldn't stand on, otherwise you're going to take 42 fixed damage, and that's going to kill most of the units in the game because fixed stats are a great idea. He won't ever directly attack you, but he counters for a lot of damage. For 90% of the map, he's also on a tile that provides a minus 50 damage and crit debuff to any unit engaging him in combat, so as to try to make you do no damage. Well, Intelligent Systems, do I have news for you? You failed! Because the players are smarter, and learned how to one-turn this and cheese it against all odds due to DLC skills that you gave us, like Reprisal or Crit Stacking, which calculates the total damage first, and then subtracts the 50 from it for some odd reason. See what I mean by untested or unbalanced? They couldn't even bother to make their final boss stupidly overpowered by changing the reduction to 100%. Anyways, for me personally, I tried over and over to move along with him, kill all the units in the way, and at some point, he just ends up moving faster, generating reinforcements too fast, and I couldn't keep up. So, I decided to play it not as intended. I rescue skipped it to the top left corner on like turn 4, slowly killed everything that came at me because everything aggroes when you get to that section, and waited until he got to the top of the map. This isn't how the devs intended, and for some reason he completely skipped the phase where he destroys the top left of the map. He beelines it right to the center and left that open. But this is a solution that I came up with on my own. I didn't have any help with it, and I'm proud of my clear nonetheless. It's not really cheesing the map. I did kill almost every enemy on the map. The only one he got to absorb was Alchrist, which gave him Luna, which was more trouble than I would like to admit because that causes one-shots too. Oh my goodness. I have so many complaints about this final map. I'm just relieved that it's over. A final map should not be unfair. It should not be reliant on RNG or perfect play either. There should be room for mistakes, and there should be room for a little bit of breathing room on Maddening, and not none at all. It should, and honestly, it does. I'm going to give them credit for this one. You can bring a variety of units to tackle the map. It's not just my setup. I've seen other people do it in various ways in the long form with other units. But I've been playing Fire Emblem for a long time. I'm getting old. These bones don't work like they used to. I'm not the best or the smartest player out there, but I beat it. And if I can, you can do it too. Overall though, I don't think Maddening is overtuned like some people are saying. Rather, I think our units and our access to tools are undertuned. And that's just a design and implementation flaw rather than anything else, and it ends up making the game tedious over it being playable or enjoyable. I think if the 4 wins and the 2 lords that they gave us were a little bit better, if they had access to bond levels, if they had access to skill inheritance, that would make things easier. Maybe not easier, but I think fairer is the word to use for Maddening, because they really just feel like a walking liability on Maddening and contribute very little. One last thing, and I want to mention the final nail in the coffin in regards to DLC, for me at least personally, is how these units translate to the main game. The whole reason that the DLC is nice is because it gives you 5 extra units to play your main campaign with. But when you get these units, they're already promoted and they're at level 1, which means they'll be vastly overpowered compared to your main roster instead of scaling based on the chapter you complete the Fell Xenologue on. It does feel like they intended you to clear this later on in the main campaign, and that's why you got these units early, but come on, Intelligent Systems. If you're on the base game Maddening, which prior to DLC waves was very nicely balanced, you'll note that this completely ruins the balance and the difficulty, which I've come to slowly appreciate as not being a good thing. If that wasn't enough, you need to replay Fell Xenologue on every new playthrough to get these units, instead of it being a separate one-off instance like Cindered Shadows was for 3 Houses. And this just makes it a tedious step that you need to do and a bit of a slog for every time I want to replay the game if I want to use the DLC units. Barriers like this to having fun should not really be part of your integration. Again, a lot of this is integration and implementation and game balance, and this is stuff like the DLC rushed out very quickly, and I get it, Engage's hype fizzled out very quickly. We've noticed that from views on our channels and just YouTube hype in general. But you didn't, you could have taken a little bit more time to just refine it and figure it out and fix it. The base game was brilliant gameplay-wise. I don't understand why we got this mess. Luckily, the one silver lining, the shining beacon in the sky, is that you can choose the difficulty of Fell Xenologue separate from the base game. So once you've cleared it on Maddening, just replay it on normal for every new file and spare yourself the headache. Listen, you've already proven yourself to be an elite gamer of the highest level, and no one is going to come hounding you for it in this single-player RPG unless you're a self-proclaimed masochist or you just use the internet. Overall, I honestly don't think this DLC is worth $30 based on the Fell Xenologue alone. Now, there might be an argument to be made that we have 7 other DLC maps that are pretty fun to play for the most part, and the bracelets they give you can be used in the main game immediately too, which again, lots of fun factor there. But unless you like replaying the game over and over and you really love Engage, this DLC isn't worth it for the average player who's going to do 1 or maybe 2 playthroughs and call it a day for Engage. I think you can safely just watch the scenes and supports on YouTube if you really want to know what they are, and you really aren't missing out on much, so don't let the FOMO get to you. That's about it for this video. I hope to have one of my non-Fire Emblem videos out later this week, so keep your eyes peeled for that, and I'll see you all there very soon. Peace.